Let me tell you a story. Not everything in our world is as simple as you think. Wherever you are, whatever you believe in, there is a force unknown to mankind. You ask me, what kind of force is it? Listen carefully. This story was once told to me by my grandfather. Perhaps he wanted to warn me or protect me. I still don't know. But what I remember most were his words, always beginning with the same question. Do you fear the dark? And now I want to ask you, do you fear the dark? This story is about a good friend of my grandfather. He had a happy life, his own farm, loyal friends. One of them was my grandfather. And of course, his wife, her name was Margaret. Everything changed one gloomy autumn day. Margaret fell ill. You ask, ill with what? That was the horror. Nobody knew. Doctors from all around tried to help. They listened, examined, prescribed medicine. But all they could do was shrug their shoulders. Her condition worsened, and no remedy, no prayer brought relief. Her body grew weaker, her eyes more anxious, as if she saw something others could not. And sometimes she whispered words to her husband that froze his blood. They are already here. I see them in the dark. Who? My grandfather's friend asked, bending over his wife. And each time he heard the same word, the same name, it left her cracked lips in a whisper that could never be forgotten. Belial. What was this name? Back then, no one knew. Time passed. Maybe the medicine worked. Maybe it was some divine gift, or perhaps just blind luck. But Margaret suddenly got better. She smiled again. She rose from her bed. She worked around the house as if nothing had happened. Life seemed to return to normal. But something was wrong. My grandfather always said he felt it in his heart. The very essence inside Margaret had changed. She was different. In her eyes there was something cold, foreign, as if she was no longer looking with her own. And soon they realized the dreadful truth. It wasn't prayer, nor medicine, nor God's will that had saved her. No, something else had reached out to her from the darkness. At first, it was small things, things no one paid attention to. At night, Margaret would wake up and stand for hours at the window, staring into the dark. She said she heard footsteps. Her husband laughed it off, blaming it on her sickness, on leftover hallucinations. But then it grew worse. Sometimes she disappeared from the house at night, returning only at dawn, unable to explain where she had been. On her arms and legs were scratches, as if from branches or claws. Friends began to notice strange things. Her voice would sometimes drop, unnaturally deep, almost masculine. And once, when they all sat at the table, Margaret turned to my grandfather and whispered words a simple woman could never know. I know your dreams. And then they understood. This was no longer the same Margaret they had known. Something else was living inside her. But the worst part was living under the same roof with her. My grandfather's friend confessed. At night he heard voices from her bedroom. She was talking to someone, though the room was empty. Her words were quiet, broken, like prayers or commands, but in no human tongue. And then came the screams, wild, piercing screams that froze the blood. They echoed through the house, making even the animals on the farm restless, breaking their chains in fear. And the footsteps, strange, fast, unlike any humans. Who is it? Who is it? He whispered to himself, but there was no answer. That's what he told my grandfather. And with each passing night, he became more certain. In that house, he no longer lived with his wife, but with something else. That night, he woke to silence. No voices, no footsteps, only a suffocating emptiness. And that was what terrified him most. Because when evil is silent, it is preparing. He took a lamp and quietly approached the bedroom. The door was ajar. Inside, Margaret sat on the floor, right in the middle of the room. Her eyes gleamed in the dark, like those of a predator. "Margaret," he called, his voice trembling. And then she spoke. But it was not her. The voice was deep, many-layered, as though dozens of beings spoke the same words at once. "We promised life, and we will take a soul." He stepped back, but it was too late. Margaret rose from the floor so sharply, as if an invisible force had lifted her. A scream, inhuman and piercing, tore through the night. When friends and neighbors rushed to the sound, the house was drowned in darkness. They found his body by the door, his face frozen in a mask of horror, eyes wide open, as if the last thing he saw did not belong to this world. And Margaret stood nearby, smiling, as if nothing had happened,